Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 63 of Ken Counts on Couch. I am your host, Ken Jennings, back from another month-long absence, taking care of some different personal uh, issues that have been going on, and preparing. Probably the most important part is preparing to move. So I will hopefully be relocating from the great state of Florida to a different state uh, by the end of summer. I think is our rough goal at the current moment. Move back in the vicinity of some family and friends. We're tired of Florida. It's worn out. It's welcome, to say the least. And for those who are asking in chat why the Santa hat is my last stream before this one was New Year's, and then before that was before I think the beginning of December or right after Thanksgiving. Um, I was out of town for a good chunk of December. I was gone for like 3 weeks, and then I came back. No, I didn't follow the mic. Let me hold on. I think some of my settings got moved around and messed up while I was gone. Let me try this. I think some of my cables may have come unplugged on my preamp and mixer. Let me boost my signal just a little bit. How's that? Is that a bit better? I'll wait for some feedback in the chat. Let me check my video broadcast and make sure it's not fucking everything up too. Okay, that should be better, I think. Also, I'm trying to fix the stupid microphone absorber because mine is an absolute piece of shit and never fails to fall off my mouth here and no, it's not the case. Not, not that I'm aware of at least. So, I'm dying to be the first to know because I'm sure it's all just something to do. The thing from the non-food. So, I think I fixed all the little springy things. Let me see if I can tilt this stick without fucking it up. And let me put my beautiful voice right there. All right, how about that? Test 1, 2, 3 on Ken Counts House. This is a premiere show. We have a professional audio setup going on here. We have no less than one audio engineer, one video engineer, and one researcher and production assistant. So let me adjust my NVIDIA broadcast a little bit more. See if I can boost some audio. See if I can boost it here. Let me boost it up here. Let me give it a 9% boost. How's that? Am I coming in any better? I might have to adjust something later today because I can't figure out where the signal interference is coming from at the moment. There shouldn't be anything overlaying stuff. Also, okay, I thought I was clipping for a second, but that should be better. That should be better. All right. So welcome to episode 63, the well-prepared and highly researched show. As I said, I'm here to discuss actual topics. I'm going to try and even though I wanted to, considering some of the shit that happened on recently on some of those true crime YouTube channels, uh, especially the person who decided to go to the what is it, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and try to sneak in to video it because they've given some small number of money in donations and thought it was the right thing to do. Uh, pretty, pretty interesting. And then tried to use their 2% black heritage and being trans as a way to uh, accuse the Memphis police of, I think Memphis police or wherever the Tyree Nichols shooting went up. That's where this St. Jude's Children's Hospital is. I think it's the research hospital. But anyway, thought about that, decided against it. And today we're going to do something that popped up in my news feed recently was children and spanking. I know I have been criticized on this topic before about the effects of it. Why would you infiltrate St. Jude? Because this person is part of that side of the internet that thinks you're making a difference by going outside of a missing child's home and screaming that their parent's a murderer and had killed their child when there's no evidence to even justify that. They were saying that because them, and I think the argument was because them and other channels have donated money to St. Jude using the YouTube Superchats for good or Superchats for charity thing, that they wanted to see where everyone's money's going. Henceforth, they were even talking about on their live stream about trying to find a patient number. Someone would let them use their patient number of their child to be able to go in and film the inside of the campus. And needless to say, multiple people reported them to the security and police. That shit got shut down pretty bad. It was interesting. It wasn't only funny for the fact that they got upset that they got caught. It was disgusting in almost every other aspect of it. So beyond that, I have been watching that side of the internet for some laughs. Given I've been doing a lot of work around my house recently, working on trying to get it cleaned up and packing up stuff because I do have physical limitations due to my back injury. So it makes packing and cleaning and doing those kind of things a little bit more difficult. I have to take it in stages. I can't just, spend, a weekend or two by myself or even with my wife packing and hoping that, we get everything done. We're still working on getting our house prepared for selling it and then preparing to buy a house up where we're going to be moving to. So it's a lot of juggling things, to say the least. I hope that by the end of this process, it's a little bit easier because I hate moving. I absolutely hate moving. So we've been kind of packing as we go, and it's still not fun. I fucking hate packing. Packing is the worst thing. So I think unpacking is a bit easier, but packing by itself is pretty shit. So let's see. I'm trying to find this article because I had 2 articles. I think it was generally 3 that we're going to be reviewing today in our discussion on whether or not childhood spanking is a good thing. Where is this last? Here we go. I think this is the paper I downloaded. But one of them I couldn't even find on LibGen, which was actually a bit frustrating. So let's pull this paper up in the right window. We'll get started here, unless you got some questions amongst the chat. Okay, trying to, like I said, coordinate everything. It's been a while since I streamed, so pardon the juggling. And also, my free version of StreamYard money has been tight because to pull off the quick move we're trying to do and everything else, it made more sense to focus my effort on that and reduce my hours spent working. So I'm focusing all my energy and time when I can unpacking and stuff, and work has kind of taken a back seat at this point. I'll basically be looking for a new place of employment once I move to my new home state. Um, the move is mostly to get back with family. I have a young brother who is not even double digits yet. I hadn't seen him in 5 years prior to going up for my Christmas, uh, my reunion for the fire department and Christmas visit. I hadn't seen him since my grandfather died in 2017. No, 2018. So 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so it'd been like 5 years. Realized, you know, we don't really have, after leaving the military, back in 16, uh, not much family or friends down this way. Anyone who was alive that was friends or family in this area has since passed on or moved. My military friends of PCS or anything like that. And given my brother's age and the issues he's got, well, half brother, but still brother, uh, missing out on some of his childhood. I don't want to miss out on that. I didn't have a brother growing up. I was an only child until, about a decade ago. Uh, so I want to be up there for his childhood. My wife and I are working on, you know, our part in having our own family, refocusing on that. And I just want to be back around family. Being in Florida has burned itself out. And I also forgot how much I missed being part of the fire department. I got to run a few calls while I was up there. Um, did a couple medical calls. I think I was part of a vehicle accident or two, or some stupid call. They weren't that big, but I forgot the thrill of it. Forgot how much I liked it. Forgot how much I actually remembered, and really want to be part of that department again. It was really important to me, and I want to put back into my community as well. So that's all kind of part of it. And yes, Storm Crow, I agree. 2018 was a lifetime ago. Oh my God. Now, I think the 𝐓𝐸𝐽𝐽 was still around back then for anyone who remembers that. Or was that 2016? I don't remember. I think that was 2016, 2017, because I forget when the Knoxville shit was. So, but let's go ahead, and before I get started here, let me pull up this first document, make sure. Okay, porn and OnlyFans are closed, blah, blah, blah. Is this the first one? All right, I think so. So I'm going to first read from where'd it go? Yeah, it moved again. I can't access the one study because no one on LibGen has indexed it and downloaded it yet. So I can only read the abstract and some snippets of the details of the paper. But it is a very recent study. It's from 2022. It's a meta-analysis on spanking and physical corporal punishment. So where'd it go here? So I will read you some of this real quick, and then I'll pull up the article from 2016 on spanking and its impacts on child development. So I'll put a poll in chat real quick while I'm thinking about it. Let me find my chat window. Do I have the chat window pulled up? I'm going to do this. So I'll drop a poll real quick. I want to get your support. I'm going to leave this up for a bit because I know there's only a few people here right now, which, again, love all of y'all. But I'll leave it up for a bit so I can let it change, and then we'll do a one at the end. Do you support spanking / corporal punishment for children? I'll just do a simple yes and no. Also, hey, taking care of business. Good to see you. It's good to see everybody. I hate not streaming. It bothers me. So, all right. So the poll's up. So go ahead and take that poll out real quick. Again, do you support corporal punishment? So spanking, yes or no? And then maybe if there's time, we'll do some, maybe I'll open up the studio and let people jump in and give their commentary on it. So let's start with this 2022 study from the Journal of Child Abuse and Neglect, volume 132, published October 2022 by 𝐓𝐸𝐬𝐚, titled Spanking in Children's Social Competence, Evidence from a U.S. Kindergarten Cohort Study. From the abstract, spanking is a background. Spanking, let me go ahead and put this on screen, fuck it. Stop screen, present, share screen, tab. We don't need tab audio. There we go. Okay. We'll try to add this to the screen here. I can probably zoom in a little bit more. Okay, that, I think, let me do one more. Okay, that's probably good. All right, so we're starting here at the background. Like I said, I don't have the full article, so we're going to read some of this. This is from a recent study. It popped up in my newsfeed a while, early in January, or middle of January, I think, talking about this study. So spanking is a risk factor for children's social competency. However, establishing causality is a challenge given selection bias in samples and the possibility of confounding the harms of excessive spanking with the effects of infrequent spanking. So basically what this is saying, for those who don't speak or understand the fancy wording of the journal, I don't like it, is establishing causality is how do we prove that the link is not just a coincidence, it's an actual link in the severity or frequency of spanking is a direct link to a decrease in children's social competency as they age. And then confounding variables or things that, so here we go. Confounding, to perplex or puzzle, to fail to see the difference, to mix up, or to make something worse. Thank you, Wiktionary. In research, it's trying to find things that are influencing the outcome, that are kind of messing up your research data set, or could be explaining the evidence you're seeing in a different way. And it's also hard to tell the difference of excessive spanking with infrequent spanking. There's a lot of things you have to try and separate out, and a lot of the research and designing research involves separating those things out. How do we show X, Y, and Z is actually, the things that are causing it, or is this some other thing, the actual reason that the children's social competency is decreased? Because there are ways to control for like socioeconomic factors, race, gender, number of children in the household. So there are ways to control for those variables in the research. It's not easy, but there are ways to do it when you're doing your math and your, when you're doing statistics with numbers and not just descriptive statistics, right? Or descriptive research, I'm sorry. So the objective, this study addressed the causality issues to strengthen the causal estimates of the links between spanking and children's social competency. For the participants and setting for this study, the study used a longitudinal U.S. kindergarten cohort data from children ages 5 to 7. So longitudinal usually means over a long period of time. That can be months or years, depending on the study design. So as we go on, the study methods. So the study used matching and lag-dependent variables to mitigate selection bias associated with lifetime. So NS is usually the number of samples in the population. So between 17,000 and to 17,537 with lifetime and recent. So sample set is between 10,393 to 10,724. Incidents of spanking. Cases in which spanking frequency exceeded 2 times a week were excluded. Sample sizes are provided in ranges due to the variations across multiple imputed samples. So there's a variation to kind of make up for different fluctuations of the data set. And they also ruled out cases where spanking was more than twice a week. I think that's interesting. So they're limiting it. So results. Lifetime experience of spanking by age 5 was associated with higher externalizing behaviors at ages 6 and 7, and with lower self-control and interpersonal skills at age 6. A recent incident of spanking at age 5 was associated with higher externalizing behaviors, lower self-control, and lower interpersonal skills at age 6 and 7. These results remain significant after cases of frequent spanking were excluded. Okay, let me make a personal note or something. Also, real quick, we have our first super chat of the day. Nobody to train, $10. Didn't leave a message. Thank you. If you want to put your message in chat, I'll go ahead and read it. Thank you for the $10. I appreciate that. 𝐷𝐷𝐿 says, spare the rods below the child also might be an issue then too. It depends, I would say. DP says, just got here. Is it raining on the counseling counter? His kid just made a white noise and I never noticed. If the white noise is that bad, let me try and fuck with this to do it. Ken hasn't streamed in forever and is in the process of moving, so he's probably screwed up. That's one way to put it. So I had to move my laptop back into my main office, or what is my office right now, because it was out of my office. So DP says, I believe there are some individual personalities in some children where they don't quite understand consequences until they literally feel them. So one of the issues you have with children, I would make the argument, is children of lower age are very concrete thinkers. So they don't have the ability to think abstractly. You don't really get that until you start crossing preteen, early teen years, where you start getting past that concrete stage. You start getting operational. You start getting the ability to do things like metacognition, to think about thinking, and to do that kind of thought process. So children are you have to speak in very direct terms. You can't speak in flowery language. Sometimes children don't listen. Now, I think there's a difference between the age sets and when spanking is important. And there are certain maybe exceptions to the rule, personally. Like if a child's in an immediate situation for harm, where they need to, like, about to put their hand on the hot stove, and they're like 2, 3, and they don't listen, they can't maybe yet process the information, that a quick pat, no injury, no mark, just enough to grab their attention and to have a negative association with this touching of the stove so they don't get hurt, would be different than, them misbehaving or something like that. Where life safety comes into play, I tend to be a bit more flexible on the rule and on the process versus just general misbehavior. Okay, noise is much better. Thank you for that, Tel. The poll should have included age ranges. There's a difference between smacking a 4-year-old and a mouthy 15-year-old boy, in my opinion. Okay, so for purposes of the poll, let's assume spanking on the behind, no slapping on the face, because that's child abuse. So spanking is generally considered an open hand slap on the buttocks that does not leave a mark or a bruise, right? It may sting, but it's not meant to leave a mark or a bruise. It's not rising to the level of child abuse, is generally what spanking is considered. So I would say, with regards to the poll, for a 15-year-old, there might be situations where, again, this is playing the exception to the rule kind of card. You have someone who has maybe delayed mental age, or has an intellectual disability, or can't comprehend, and because of that, the 15-year-old physically might have the mindset of a 9, 10-year-old. But if we assume average general intelligence, average age, what would be age appropriate for them? 15-year-old? I don't know. What's your thoughts? So, Granny Goose says, I was only spanked twice, and it was a huge emotional thing for me. Perhaps more frequent spanking is somehow less damaging emotionally. Well, the thing is for those 2 spankings, Granny, so let me leave this up. So for those 2 spankings, right, you were emotionally damaged by it. It was an emotional, I wouldn't say damage. It had the potential to cause emotional damage to you because of, depending on how old you were and what it was over. Was it over, did I leave the milk out? Or did I break grandma's urn and spilt her ashes over the house? Did I not close the door to my bedroom? Was I, self-exploration at a young age? Kids do that. Parents will spank their kids and beat their kids over shit like that. It's pretty awful. So whatever it was for, the negative association, repeated, just like, when we think about phobias, repeated exposure lessens the reaction to the event. So it's not as big of a deal than if we, so if you're afraid of spiders, the first time you see a spider, I'll use a personal example. Until we had tarantulas in the house, because my wife likes tarantulas. I'm not a huge fan. I live with them now. I'm okay. I don't like spiders. If a spider ran across my windshield while driving down the interstate going 70 miles an hour, I'd freak out like a little girl. Now, after having tarantulas, a couple of them, and they're my wife, but I still help out. I feed, help with feeding, giving them the crickets, watering them, and when we have to move their enclosures, it's not fun, but still, I've done it, and it's actually helped me. So a spider runs across my windshield now. I'm like, oh, okay, stay safe, buddy. Like, it don't bother me. That's how I look at it. So, but the sad thing is the phobia of spiders versus repeated over and over again spanking. And definitely if that spanking starts as normal spanking and then rises, it starts crossing that threshold of being abusive, right? It's now leaving marks, it's leaving fruits, but the kids find it to be normal punishment. They think, oh, I get spanked, my friends get spanked, it's not a big deal. I can report this to a teacher, but they're not going to care because, they think it's not a big deal. So they don't report it, hence the abuse can start to escalate and go on and on and on. And you see where it begins to spiral. Not that it happens all the time, but even regular spanking will still desensitize the child to it. And so the child is less likely to respond, hence an increase in force, increase in frequency. But instead of one swat to the butt, now it's 2 or 3 swats to the butt. They might respond now. But after that, maybe they don't respond, so you have to do 5 swats, and now it gets harder. So there's a very real potential for what is a corrective measure to become abusive if the child is, not responding the way you want them to. I'm not saying that's always the case, but there's the potential for it to exist. So, let's see. Stormcrow says, my own anecdote, my cousin who had a multitude of other familial problems and was raised by her grandparents, never had spanking like we did. He's the family fuck up. Grandma said she should have let Grandpa beat at least once in his teenage years, but my grandparents were born in the 20s and 40s. He said, my father was a boxer, but always a good-hearted and kind guy. Only spanked me a handful of times, but being aware of strength and kindness, being able to coexist is a big deal, I think. So, the way the trade says, when I was 3 through 5 for not taking a nap, my bio dad spanked me with a belt. So, okay. Once we get to the belt, I think we're getting to the point where it can belt, or like in the thumbnail, I put a paddle because I couldn't find a good paddle, from stock photos at the moment because I don't have my Camera Pro. I found the love paddle basically. That's got a little heart on the end. It's a paddle of love because we're spanking for love, right? You could make the argument. So in this case, no way to train. I would say that would be potentially abusive, given the strength of for the age and the incident and the corrective activity. The amount of emotional harm inflicted is not proportional to the misbehavior or the life safety of the situation, would be my argument. And I still would fail to see a situation where immediate life safety comes into play. You have time to take off or grab a belt to spank the child for that corrective activity, if that makes sense. So thank you for the comments and continuing the poll. Let's go ahead and continue some more of this. So the results of this was showing that there are associations with spanking, even just 2 times a week for during childhood, that there's higher externalizing behaviors, lower self-control, lower interpersonal skills, even starting at ages 6 or 7. So if we go down here, we read into the conclusion. This is from the abstract again. The results support the argument that spanking harms children's social development. Now, if we go into the introduction, so this is some of the stuff that I'm actually able to get from this. We're going to go into another paper that's about 14 pages, I think. That's including reference pages, so subtract 2 or 3 pages. So this is for this 2022 article. Corporal punishment is defined as using physical force with the intention of causing pain for the purposes of correction or control. UN Committee on the Rights of Child, 2007. Spanking is the most common form of corporal punishment and typically involves an adult hitting a child on the buttocks with the hand. Citation, based on attachment, self-determination, and social learning theories, researchers have suggested that spanking disrupts parent-child attachment, hinders children's ability to manage their own behavior, and models aggression. In line with these theories, research findings indicate that spankings may undermine children's social competence or a child's social skills and behaviors that help them to interact positively with others, measured by interpersonal skills, regulate their actions, measured by self-control, and engage in less disruptive behaviors, measured by externalizing behaviors. See this citation below. However, researchers continue to debate about whether spanking causes low social competency. One causality issue lies in potential selection bias in samples where children who were exposed to spanking differ from those who were not spanked. Selection bias, oh, damn it, I hate when it's not in my PDF reader. Selection bias is a major issue in spanking research that, given that randomized trials are unethical and impossible, that's true, but parental use of spanking is not random. Rather, it is determined by child and parent characteristics, such as child's initial behaviors and family socioeconomic status. When researchers fail to control for selection bias, the link between spanking and child outcomes can be spurious. Another issue is whether culturally normative, infrequent spanking is significantly associated with child outcomes, which I think is kind of what they focused on here. But infrequent outcomes still have, or infrequent spanking still has a negative influence on outcome. So culturally normative. So I would say that means, not abusive within the definition of corporal punishment. Most research has demonstrated that there are indeed associations between spanking frequency and child outcomes, but the linear gradients might overgeneralize the harm of infrequent spanking. The actual harm came from, quote, excessive spanking. Although the effects of spanking are thought to be qualitatively similar to those stemming from more severe violence, differing in only terms of degree, so dimensional model of adversity, see the citation. Little research has investigated how robustly infrequent spanking is linked to child outcomes. So I think that's where this study is a bit different, and it's an interesting study, is it's not focused on constant spanking, severe spanking, or where it becomes child abuse. This study focused on 2 times a week or less spanking of a child of kindergarten age, using a longitudinal type study. It was over 10 to 17,000, depending on the start versus end, I think, population. That's a lot of populations. A lot of people in the sample, I would say, for something like this, showing that even twice a week or less spankings of a child still has negative influence on their social outcomes. So the study addresses these causality issues by using matching to reduce selection bias and excluding cases of excessive as defined by 2 or more times per week spanking from the analysis. Again, I think this is kind of sort of novel in that case where no one's really done this. No one's really looked at just how significant few spankings are, but using them regardless are on child social development. Developmental psychologists have predicted that parental use of spanking has a negative association with children's social competence. According to attachment theory, the experience of being punished or threatened with punishment by parents for expressing distress can weaken parent-child attachment. I would agree with that. I've seen that in play. In more than one case, more than one client, I've seen that in play. Children who feel insecure about whether their needs will be met may be unable to delay gratification in the absence of immediate responses, undermining their ability to self-regulate. So what this is basically saying, for those who may not get it, is children who require that immediate spanking to correct their behaviors, because that is the method used to correct their behaviors. When it's not present, they are not self-correcting their own behaviors. Hence, their behaviors get worse. They don't have the ability to regulate their own behaviors because we haven't chosen a different method of discipline and punishment. I don't like using punishment. I prefer negative consequences, even though I say punishment is my intent. So if I say punishment, I mean negative consequences. So using negative consequences, or sometimes even positive consequences, to change negative behaviors, there's ways to do that, will help them learn to self-regulate, especially at that age range. They're in school, they have to learn how to behave and manage things at school, not like touch other people, do disruptive behaviors, be able to interact with their peers. So if they're requiring the spanking to always change their behavior, or especially certain types of behavior, then they're not learning to manage themselves. They're basically attaching themselves to the parent in a negative way. And they're insecurely attached to the parent because if I go and pull up attachment theory stuff, secure attachments is healthy. You have insecure attachments. You have things like reactive attachment. And there's another one. I always forget what it is. But those types of attachments that aren't secure are usually negative and have different social outcomes on the child as they age. So let's see. In addition, the experience of being punished for seeking comfort and security, which can happen with spanking, may lead to inhibiting or hyperactivating emotional expressions, hindering positive and supportive interactions with others. So I'd be curious to read some of these citations. Because like I said, I couldn't read necessarily the whole article, so we're getting snippets from this research article. Really hope it'll come out at some point. Someone will put it on Sci-Hub. According to self-determination theory, spanking can undermine children's initiation and regulation of their own behaviors. I think I kind of was saying that. This view posits that children desire self-determination. Without external control, they learn to internalize reasons for their actions, watch their own behaviors, and increase their agency, the capacity to make choices and exert their own will. From 𝐷𝐲𝐿nick and Ryan, 1989. So this isn't something new. This is something we've identified for decades. However, as far as that, children do want to be, the way I phrase it to parents and kids is most kids want to probably take on the roles and responsibilities of about someone a couple years older than them. For the 9-year-old, they want to be doing the cool 11-year-old things. For the 10-year-old, they want to be doing the 12-year-old thing. For the 5-year-old, they want to be doing the 7 or 8-year-old thing. Because it's, it's showing their maturity. They're showing, hey, you could trust me, even though some parents would be like, I would never trust my kid with that level of responsibility. There's that desire, and that's part of the child's self-determination. I want to do things. I want to be responsible for things. I want to do this. Even if they fail at it, it's not necessarily a bad thing because the failure is a learning, as long as the failure isn't dangerous, right? So what I think this here is positing is that with this, spanking being used in the form it is, it's not letting the child be able to do things on their own, and is building an attachment with the parent in the punishment itself, in that consequence of spanking, that limits their ability to grow because of the negative emotions and negative feelings and the fear. A lot of kids can be afraid of being spanked because maybe dad spanks harder than mom or mom spanks harder than dad. And so, I would rather kids I work with or parents I work with, they would rather kids say, Mom, I fucked up, I broke the vase. And come to them and know that they're probably going to get grounded or something. But by taking that action, that self-determination, they go, I know I screwed up, but I'm taking responsibility for it. That's a huge growth step. Instead of relying on spanking, if the child's going to be spanked, is the child really going to want to come and tell mom, I broke the vase, or tell dad I broke the vase, is the way I would look at it. So, however, control, God damn it, where'd it go? Where'd it go? However, controlling children's behaviors through punishment discourages autonomy, I think I was saying that, and hinders the natural growth of agency. In other words, spanking may delay the development of self-control and promote unregulated child behavior. Finally, according to social learning theory from Bandura, parents' use of spanking models aggression as a default human response and an appropriate way to solve problems. Basically saying when something goes wrong, we default to an aggressive action. So the spanking is considered an aggressive action. It's a physical punishment. So if we're using that as our way to deal with things, the child will learn to model that type of behavior in all their interactions and all their ways to deal with things. If I'm having a conflict with my sibling, I'm going to go to fighting with them instead of talking it out. Or if I'm having a conflict with, another kid at school, I'm going to go physical with them instead of finding a different way to deal with it. So in the process of learning, children may interpret others' intentions as hostile and internalize the message that violence can be useful in dealing with others. This can increase aggression in children and influence their interpersonal skills in ways that make it difficult to maintain positive relationships. Empirical research has provided evidence that spanking is linked with compromised social skills in children. Most studies measure the frequency of recent spankings, e.g. in the past week or month, and its association with children's social competency outcome. More frequent spankings was associated with children's higher level of externalizing behaviors, so possibly negative behaviors. So those negative outbursts or reactions would be what externalizing behaviors are. A lower self-control between ages 6 to 7, and 10 to 11, and lower levels of interpersonal skills and teachers' assessments, who found no association with other self-reported data. Notably, numerous studies focused on externalizing behaviors. Meta-analyses show varying effect sizes between 0.07 to 0.14 at statistically significant levels. Due to lack of research, meta-analyses on a link between spanking and the current study's other outcomes of interest, self-control and interpersonal skills, are not available. So what they're saying is there's not really much research on the type of things they're focusing on with self-control and interpersonal skills. So it's really hard to do a meta-analysis and get good data from it. A few researchers have examined the links between lifetime experience of spanking and children's outcomes, again focusing on externalizing behaviors. Using the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study, kindergarten class of 1998 to 1999, cited here, showed that having a lifetime experience of spanking up to age 5 was significantly associated with higher externalizing behaviors at ages 6 and 8. By comparing between children who had never been spanked and children who have been spanked at least once, the researchers demonstrated the benefits of refraining from spanking, 𝐓𝐢𝐻𝐬 et al. 2018. And some previous research has demonstrated significant associations between spanking and either lifetime experience or recent incidents and children's social competency outcomes. However, the majority of above-mentioned studies did not properly control for selection bias in samples. The following factors relate to both parental use of spanking and children's social competency outcomes: parental race, age, immigrant status, marital status, socioeconomic status, religiosity, speaking a language other than English at home, and residential location in the U.S. Additionally, children's characteristics such as gender, health status, disability status, center-based care experience, and earlier social behaviors, so externalizing behaviors, not only predict their exposure to spanking, but also their later social competency outcomes. If not properly addressed, selection bias will affect the estimates of spanking. So what it's saying here is these characteristics and the socializing behaviors can also predict the likelihood a child's going to be spanked. So is a male child who seems to be more, I don't want to say ADHD, but like experiencing like ADHD or focused behaviors, not listening, going to be spanked, more likely to be spanked than a female child who has some misbehaviors, but maybe not as often. But maybe they're in a higher socioeconomic status, family has higher education, versus the male child's family who has maybe lower education, lower socioeconomic status. They all have a factor to play in likelihood of spanking, it seems. Another issue is that existing studies on the topic have rarely distinguished excessive spanking from normal or infrequent spanking in examining the association with child outcomes. The dimensional model of adversity has suggested that spanking may be negatively linked to child outcomes in a similar way to more severe violence. However, excessive spanking, which might be tantamount to physical abuse, should be distinguished from infrequent spanking. Otherwise, researchers cannot tell whether the observed harm reported in the literature stems from physical abuse or other extreme punishment. Hence why I think they focused on the spanking the way they did, on only twice a week or less, to mitigate the potential for physical abuse spanking to get put in the data set, would be my thought. So let me go ahead and hang on, I've got a thing that just popped up. Give me 1 second. What the hell just popped up? Is it a Discord thing? I'm not sure. I don't know what that was. That's weird. Anyway, all right, let me check out the chat real quick. Let's see here. So what I mean by children managing their own behaviors and what the paper is children have to learn to self-regulate, is learning to, instead of acting out and going and saying punching a kid, learning to control their own behaviors. So that's what it means. There's not necessarily, and again, not necessarily the kid decides what their own punishment consequences are. Now, I have done things like that with families, and it has been very effective. But that's not what that means, especially for younger kids. But children do have to, as they age, especially younger ages too, need to learn how to control their own behaviors and go from acting out and doing whatever they please to learning to learn what's socially acceptable, what they can and can't do, what's play, what's not play, what's not okay. Like, it's okay if I wrestle around a little bit at home with my sibling or a friend, but it's not okay to do that in school in the middle of class, right? So there is that self-management behavior. DP says, is the question primarily on social development, or does it include emotional development? Or are they essentially the space-time of this science? I think they kind of relate. So I think at this part, you're seeing these social outcomes in that the child's behaviors, the negative, these externalizing behaviors, so these negative outbursts or negative behaviors are going to impact their emotion, are part of what's probably damaging their emotional growth as well. Because would a child who is emotionally healthy and emotionally competent be doing said thing? So possibly for the purposes of this, they probably play together. I wouldn't say they're necessarily linked. Taking care of business of look at many of the people today, younger generations, that were never slapped, spanked, or given hard labor chores, etc. They're messed up as adults because they never experienced severe consequences. There's a difference between severe consequences and having to use aggressive consequences as a corrective measure. I've had kids I've worked with go from misbehaving, wanting to run away, to literally having good turnarounds in a period of a couple months on following parents' instructions, deciding as a family unit what is and isn't okay, what's appropriate behavior, what's not, and having the child be a part of that conversation and not just being dictated to is important too, in my opinion, because I've seen it make a difference in not only the child listening and learning to self-regulate and learning to reduce their negative behaviors by giving them a say in it. Then it's also for accountability. The child can't say, I didn't know any better. The child knows because they were part of that discussion. They were part of the discussion that said, if I'm out past 9, I'm losing my phone for a week unless I called ahead of time. Or if I'm on my phone at school and it gets taken by a teacher, then I'm losing my phone for a week, because that's how, 1 second. And that's what the, sorry, I had to take care of something real quick. And that's what the setup is for the family dynamic. And I've seen it work effectively. So that's why I like that setup, because it works really well. So, but, sorry. What was I trying to think? Sorry, I'm just trying to process some of this information. Right, just reading some of these other comments here. Yeah, I think what Stormcrow says, there's a difference between giving spankings and never receiving negative consequences for an action. You can give negative consequences for something like that. You don't have to necessarily give, what is it? What I'm trying to say? What's the way to phrase this here? Okay. So I would say you can still have consequences and deal with these behaviors without having to resort to the physical aggression that is the spanking. Because even a light pop that leaves no mark, that just stings, or even just grabs the attention, because it appears, especially for younger children, to be an aggressive action, will really grab the kid's attention and can cause emotional issues. So, taking care of business says, my wife learned after our second of 4 children that you don't give children choices on topics that are important, such as picking what to eat, for example. Of course, child is going to choose ice cream for dinner. The children. She was one of the people about giving children choices. I agree to a point. Like if you want to choose baseball instead of football, or if you want to read instead of paint, or other things. There's the thing is, you can give a child a choice. They might choose ice cream for dinner, but what you can do is set the child up for success by letting them have the option, but don't let them, like if they say, I want ice cream, you redirect and say, well, no, we have these options for dinner, mac and cheese, or we're doing steak, or we're doing chicken, and those are things you can have for dinner. Which one would you like? And then next time you ask them, what do you want for dinner? And instead of them saying ice cream, say, they do that the first few times. But after they start learning, maybe the next day you ask them, what do you want for dinner? And they give a response of chicken instead of ice cream. And they make that choice. That deserves reward and praise because they made a good decision, and they should learn that they're actually making good decisions and reinforce that. You don't have to, let them make the negative decisions or let them do things that require the negative corrections, like spanking, would be my argument. So, does that make sense at all? That's what I'm trying to say. Where'd it go? I thought I had something pop up, but never mind. So, anyway, sorry, Discord was blowing up in my ears. So, Roscoe says, you give the child choice in the small things. Do you want bath time and then brush your teeth, as an example? Let's see here. The choices in what order to do things and enforce control over life. I agree with that. But you always have to be ready to follow through. As they grow older, they can make more decisions. Spankings are oftentimes thought, or though is something that parents do as the easy way out to punish a child rather than parenting and explain to the kid why they did what was wrong. I agree with that. That's a good point. So, I've carried a foster that was screaming and crying to bed a few times, and I just closed the door. We have an emotional chart for them to point at. We also teach breathing techniques, smell the roses, blow the candle. Not open choices, but provide options. See, Roscoe, that's a really good way to state that. Very well done. So let's continue here. Trying to figure out what was. I swear I had something pop up on my thing. Where'd it go? 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, let me get back. I'm trying to juggle a few things. All right, where was I? The study used multiple analytical approaches to address the above-mentioned causality issues. The study adopted matching to address the limitations of the non-experimental design of spanking research. Matching pre-processes the data so that the control groups and the treatment groups are as similar as possible in terms of observed covariates. Several recent studies employed matching techniques to improve balance among the covariates at the level of the child, the parent, and the family. So these different variables in those things. In Colombia, the United States, and Japan, respectively, the researchers identified a negative link between spanking and the children's behavioral development after ruling out the influence of many of the observed covariates, the number of which ranged from 35 to 38. So after ruling out all this crap, right, all these different things and more, they still observed a negative link between spanking and child's behavioral development. To rule out the negative effects of excessive spanking, the study excluded cases of frequent spanking from the analysis, which we talked about already. Some researchers have defined high-frequency spanking as parental use of spanking 2 or more times a week, estimating that 6 to 13% of parents engage in this behavior. Others define frequent spankings as the parental use of spanking on an always versus sometimes or never basis, estimating that about 10% of parents were frequent spankers. Preliminary analyses for the current study showed about 11% of children had experienced frequent spanking by the parent respondent. If frequent were defined as 2 or more times a week, 4% of children, if frequent were defined as 3 or more times a week, see table 2. Based on the preliminary estimates, cases in which spanking frequency was 2 or more times a week were excluded. So, greater than 2 times. Was 2 or more times a week. So, I think they're talking just once a week spanking. That's an interesting amount. So part of the behavioral model that's at play here, so like talking about these different social models and behavioral models for children, is spanking is seen as an aggressive punishment, right? Children perceive spanking generally as a sign of is a physical aggressive action because it requires you actually putting your hands on someone and causing or inflicting pain. Kids learn at a young age that doing that's not appropriate. So when your parent does it, it has a negative influence on it generally, right? Does this particular study address that versus how kids perceive what aggressive consequences are? I think this is more focused on the spanking, infrequent spanking, and the likely and how it relates to social outcomes in children versus other or non-spanking. I think that's a different type of study. I don't think it would be focused on this because it's focusing on two specific types of things. Since I would assume that kids would say most consequences that their parents made raising them more aggressive in nature because they didn't get what they wanted ultimately. There's a difference between not getting what you want is not necessarily aggressive. You know, being talked to versus being yelled at or screamed at, aggressive versus non-aggressive. I've had kids who didn't get their way in counseling or families I've worked with in different situations, not get their way, and they would never call them not getting their way any type of aggressive action because their parents handled it calmly, maturely, or handled it in certain ways that didn't require doing things, screaming or yelling or fighting or spanking or hitting or escalating to abuse behaviors because of that, right? It was, a healthy way to address it. So yeah, the kid didn't get their way, but the kid still was able to learn and process why they didn't get their way, why they didn't get what they wanted. And it's a growing point that's not a negative action. It's still a positive outcome. It's a positive response to it. So that's what my argument would be. So their hypothesis for this literature were kind of getting to what they focused on. Lifetime spanking experience will be associated with higher externalized behaviors, lower self-control, and lower interpersonal skills on matched samples. Hypothesis 2, recent incidents of spanking will be associated with the higher externalizing behaviors, lower self-control, and lower interpersonal skills on matched samples. Hypothesis 3, the association of recent incidents of spanking and children's social competency outcomes will remain statistically significant even in cases of frequent spanking, which I think is what their data showed. So this is where we're limited to the section snippets now. I get this small section I can't see more of. So the discussion is still limited, but the conclusion, I have this first section. We kind of read this in the abstract. Findings of this study provide important implications for parents, practitioners, and policymakers. Many parents use spanking to a belief that it will reduce antisocial behaviors and promote positive comportment in their children. Parents should be aware that, in fact, spanking may hinder their children's development of self-control and interpersonal skills and increase externalized behaviors, even if used infrequently. Practitioners should provide, and then I can't read any more else than that. So, but we saw the outcome from this study did still show a negative, relationship with that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me see if I can find. Let's see here. Where's this other study I downloaded? I think this is it. Let me pull it over here. Where is it at here? I'm trying to get back to the right thing here. Okay. The correct window. Oh wait, is this the wrong thing? Oh, crap, where'd it go? I must have lost it in my tabs I got open here. Right. Is this the one? Okay, I have it here. Okay, I have it ready. Okay, here we go. So let me check the poll real quick. We're currently at, with 21 votes, do you support spanking corporal punishment for children? 64% say yes, and 36% say no. So that's interesting. I think it's shifted a bit. All right, so let's pull up this next one. This is from 2016. And it has a huge sample set, if I'm remembering correctly. Don't share tab audio. Okay, here we go. Pull this up. All right, so this, it's like 17 pages. I'm not going to read the whole thing. We're going to skip through it. Let's start with, okay. Sorry, I was sending my wife what type of potato skins to get me from Dollar Tree. So here we go. Let's start with this. So we will, this is Spanking and Child Outcomes, Old Controversies and New Meta-Analysis. This is from 2016 in the Journal of Family Psychology, volume number 30, if anyone's curious. You can also look up the title of the article if as well. So let's see here. This is the abstract. Whether spanking is helpful or harmful to children continues to be the source of considerable debate among both researchers and the public. This article addresses two persistent issues, namely whether effect sizes for spanking are distinct from those of physical abuse, and whether effect sizes for spanking are robust to study design differences. Meta-analyses focused specifically on spanking were conducted on a total of 111 unique effect sizes, representing 160,927 children. 13 of 17 mean effect sizes were significantly different from zero, and all indicated a link between spanking and an increased risk for detrimental child outcomes. Effect sizes did not substantially differ between spanking and physical abuse or by study design characteristics. So I'm going to skip around some of this introduction stuff here because it's a lot of background stuff. So previous meta-analyses of physical punishment. The question of whether physical punishment and spanking or physical punishment is linked to children's outcomes has been addressed in 4 published meta-analyses in the last 15 years. Again, this is in 2016. So by basically from 2001. The first and most widely cited of the meta-analyses was published by 𝐷𝐿, 2002. This review included 88 studies used in separate meta-analyses of the associations between parent use of physical punishment and 11 child outcomes, 4 of which were measured in adulthood. Physical punishment was defined as, quote, the use of physical force with the intention of causing a child to experience pain, but not injury, for the purposes of correction or control of the child's behavior, and excluded any methods that would, quote, knowingly cause severe injury to the child. All 11 meta-analyses were significant, and all but one indicated an undesirable association. So all but one, that's pretty damn strong. Specifically, physical punishment was associated with more immediate compliance, but was also associated with lower levels of moral internalization, quality of the parent-child relationship, and mental health in childhood and adulthood, as well as higher levels of aggression in childhood and adulthood, antisocial behavior in childhood and adulthood, risk of being a victim of physical abuse, and risk of being abusing own child or spouse as an adult. So not as small, or smaller effect size there compared to the rest. Let's see. The second meta-analytic article on the outcomes associated with physical punishment includes 70 studies and 3 meta-analyses. In 2004, physical punishment was defined as, quote, a form of non-abusive or customary physical punishment by a parent or adult serving as a parent. The outcomes were grouped into very broad and heterogeneous categories of negative outcomes. Effective outcomes included mental health problems and low self-esteem. Cognitive outcomes encompassed a wide range of outcomes, including academic impairment, suicidality, and attitudes about spanking, and behavior outcomes included disobedience, behavior problems, child abuse, spouse abuse, and hyperactivity. Higher scores on any of these outcomes measured indicated negative outcomes. The weighted mean effect sizes were D equals 0.20 for effect outcomes, with D equals 0.06 for cognitive outcomes, and D equals 0.21 for behavioral outcomes. Each of these was statistically significant. The conclusion afforded by these meta-analyses is that physical punishment was associated significantly, albeit modestly, with more effective cognitive and behavioral problems in children, broadly defined. The third meta-analytic article was distinct from the previous two in that each of the effect sizes were based on differences between an effect size for physical punishment and an effect size for another disciplinary method. Ooh, that's interesting. Using 26 studies, separate meta-analyses were conducted by comparison groups rather than by an outcome type. Studies measures of physical punishment were categorized into 4 types. Conditional spanking, quote, physical punishment that was used primarily to back up milder disciplinary tactics. Customary physical punishment, quote, typical parent usage. Overly severe physical punishment, quote, measures that gave extra points for severity of physical punishment, and predominant use of physical punishment, predominant disciplinary tactics, or proportional usage. Cited there. When the main effects were examined, predominantly and overly severe categories of physical punishment were found to be associated with more detrimental outcomes overall, effect sizes here, respectively, where the customary and conditional categories of physical punishment were associated with small levels of beneficial outcomes, respectively. When these physical punishment categories were compared with other forms of discipline, conditional spanking was found to be associated with lower levels of noncompliance and antisocial behavior than disciplinary alternatives. Customary physical punishment was found to predict more detrimental outcomes when children's initial levels of child misbehavior were statistically controlled, but was generally not significantly different from other disciplinary tactics, including reasoning, taking away privileges, and timeout, and the strength and direction of its association with child outcome. The severe and predominant categories of physical punishment were consistently associated with detrimental outcomes, such as less compliance, lower conscience, lower positive behavior, and higher antisocial behavior. The authors concluded that, in general, physical punishment was no worse than other disciplinary techniques. This is, of course, to say that physical punishment was no better than other disciplinary techniques in promoting beneficial outcomes in children. The fourth meta-analysis, so that was one article, or one meta-analysis. The fourth meta-analysis article by Fergus in 2013 focused solely on longitudinal studies and the outcomes of internalizing behavior problems, and cognitive performance. The meta-analyses were conducted using 45 studies and calculated separate effect sizes for spanking or corporal punishment, which is defined as, quote, a wider range of more serious acts, including pushing, shoving, hitting with an object, or striking the face, yet generally falling short of physically injurious or life-threatening acts of violence. The bivariate effect size for spanking and corporal punishment were significantly different from 0 across all 3 outcomes in externalizing, internalizing, and cognitive performance. And let's see. Secondary set of meta-analyses were conducted for studies that reported effect sizes controlling for children's previous behavior. There were not sufficient numbers of studies for all possible comparisons, but reported effect size for children's behavior problems were these numbers and cognitive performance. The effect size for spanking were smaller than for corporal punishment, and the effect sizes for longitudinal associations controlling the child's previous behavior were smaller than basic longitudinal associations, yet all were significantly different from 0, and all indicated detrimental outcomes associated with spanking or corporal punishment. Taken together, these meta-analyses provided evidence that physical punishment is associated with negative child outcomes, particularly when the outcomes are divided into finer-grained categories, rather than when they are grouped into broad categories, and that harsher methods of physical punishment are more strongly associated with negative child outcomes than ordinary spanking. So this is the research they read going into this, right? So, let's see here. Go back to chat real quick. Do they define the detrimental outcome? I think it was talked about earlier. Shadefire says, humor me a moment, if you'd be so kind. Your kid, let's say, punches another kid at school for no reason. Do you spank them when they get home? If so, then why? I'd have to know more than that. There's obviously reasons justified to know. If the reason is no warranted, then yes, they will be punished. Whether I'd spank them or not depends on the situation. Okay. Interesting comments going on in chat here. So let's see. Let's see if I can. Like I said, my voice has been kind of rough. So let me see if I can skip ahead a bit. Spanking. So these are some of the issues they were trying to figure out in part of their research design. Spanking has been confounded with harsh forms of physical punishment. Let's see here. The present study, inclusion and exclusion of studies from past meta-analyses. Coding of effect sizes. So Cohen's D calculations. Those are always fun. Let's see. Coding and study level moderators. So the results. So a total of 111 unique effect sizes were derived from data representing 204,410 child-measured occasions. These studies included data from a total of 160,927 unique children. The study level effect sizes, confidence intervals, and sample sizes are listed in Table 1. For between subject designs, the subsample sizes for the subgroup were spanked, and the subgroup that was not spanked are presented, whereas for within subject group designs, a single sample size is presented. As a means of graphically representing the effect sizes, this table also includes bar graphs of the effect sizes and their corresponding confidence intervals for both individual studies and the random effect. Let's see here. Of the 100, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Of the 111 individual effect sizes, 102 were in the direction of a detrimental outcome, with 78% or 78 of those statistically significant. In contrast, 9 of the effect sizes were in the direction of beneficial outcome, but only 1 was statistically different from 0. Thus, among the 79 statistically significant effect sizes, 99% indicated an association between spanking and a detrimental childhood outcome. Holy shit, that's a lot. Let's see here. Let's look at this table. So individual studies by outcome, beneficial outcomes, detrimental outcomes. So positive numbers, detrimental outcomes. Individuals. So immediate defiance showed some. Oh, was that the only one? Damn. Let's see. Low moral internalization. It's pretty high. Child aggressions, somewhat. These are some negative effects. Damn. Wow. Child internal behavior problems. Child mental health problems. Oof. Child alcohol or substance use. Negative parent-child relationship. Yeah, these are pretty high for that, I would say. Given the effect size. Impaired cognitive ability, kind of okay-ish. Not great, but low self-esteem. Wow, this is an interesting study. Victim of physical abuse. Wow. That's pretty damn high. That's a hell of a significant relationship there and that effect. Oof. Adult antisocial behavior, adult mental health problems, adult alcohol or substance abuse, adult support for physical punishment, overall effect size of 0.33. Damn. So spank, no spank, confidence interval. That's a lot. That's an interesting table. Yeah, I don't think I can read all that because I think my voice is starting to go. Also, hi, Tracy. How's it going? Jay Price said, like I said, it's just hypothetical. There's no reason. You got mad because there is spanking the go-to method for punishment for you. What I'm getting at is, while I agree with you somewhat, it's all on a situation-to-situation basis. But teaching a lesson of violence is bad. Don't hit people by, hitting them as well. It seems, well, it's mixed messaging in the lesson you'd be trying to impart at best. I agree with that. So I think these are interesting questions that are going on in chat. You have a good point to make here. I still think that, in general, the best way to deal with it would be to not jump to physical aggression in the outcome and going to spanking. I think you can deal with the situation without having to go physical, is my point. So as much as I hate to cut it short, I think my voice is not going to last that much longer. I've been having trouble with coughing and stuff recently. So any more questions or comments left before while I wrap it up here? I hate cutting it short. I know it's a really short stream, but I'm trying to get back into the habit of streaming, especially with all the stuff going on. But I am curious to see what chat has to say real quick before I head out for the day. So, any comments? Also, thanks again to our super chatter earlier, Nobody Train. I appreciate that $10 super chat. So, hope you feel better. Sounds rough. Like it's just how I've been feeling. It's come with just cleaning and packing and stuff. It just, it kicks up dust and stuff. So, it wasn't just a couple of studies. I think it has the potential to. I've been drinking, eating ice cream and drinking like hot soup and stuff. They both have been helping. It just comes and goes. I've also been talking a lot. I haven't been talking much outside of the stream. So, but thank you everybody for participating in today's live stream. I appreciate it. And I hope that we can stream again sometime. I was wanting to do a local stream after, but I don't think I can do it. I am going to try and find a way to get back to streaming maybe more than once a week if I can. I'd like to, because I have the ability to now, depending on how much progress I get done in my house during the week. I'll see if I can carve out more time. No guarantees yet. I've been trying to do that for months, but as far as carving out more time. But outside of that, I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for watching the stream. I appreciate all the comments and backgrounds in chat. Let me end this poll real quick. So the poll ends with 62% being for spanking and corporal punishment, and the other percentage was, where'd it go? Where'd it go? Where's the stupid poll at? Did it not show up? Anyway, the results didn't drop in the chat. That's weird. Oh, there we go. 65 yes, 34 no out of 26 votes. So with no other comments, I'm gonna go ahead and play the outro. Everybody take care, and I look forward to streaming with you guys again, hopefully real soon. I do miss streaming. It is one of my favorite things to do. It's really relaxing, and definitely a way for me to kind of de-stress, especially with preparing for a move and selling my house and stuff. So take care, everybody, and have a great rest of your weekend. Peace.
Change it, melt, upgrade it, charge it, point it, zoom it, press it, snap it, work it, quick erase it, slide it, get it.